Hi friends, welcome back or welcome if you're new. My name is Caitlin and today I'm sharing how I got back into reading as an adult who also has ADD. Up until a couple years ago, I had not read a book for pleasure, honestly probably since middle school. Over the past couple years, I've slowly built a relationship with reading that actually works for my brain. No pressure, no guilt, just enjoyment. So if you've been in a reading slump or struggle with attention, decision paralysis, or memory issues, hi. You are not alone, and this video is also for you. I'm sharing everything that has worked for me, from habit stacking to my TBR jar, to why I bought a Kobo, and how I stopped forcing myself to finish books I wasn't loving. So instead of saving the best tip for last, I'm just giving it to you straight out of the gate because without this tip, I would be nowhere in the reading world. The biggest thing that has helped me, especially as someone with ADD, hands down, is habit stacking. I personally am a morning person. I'm introverted, so I typically wake up with the most energy I'll have in the day. For that reason, mornings really set the tone for my day, and they're also the most productive part of the day for me. And I always make myself a latte first thing. Well, actually, my wonderful boyfriend Jesse makes them for me every morning, but I digress. So I decided to use that time when I'm already doing something that is standard in my routine as my reading time. At the beginning of the year, I gave myself a goal of reading 30 pages every day as an attainable goal, but I was also easily able to track in my journal. And in the morning while I'm drinking my coffee, I typically have about 30 to 45 minutes to read, so I can easily accomplish that 30-page goal within that time. And I've already achieved something before 7 a.m. Anything else that I read throughout the day is just me surpassing that goal, which also in turn gives me more dopamine. It sounds so simple, but this gave my brain the structure that I desperately need in the morning. And those of us with ADD or ADHD know how difficult structure is for us, but this way I wasn't scrambling to find time to read. It was just added into a routine that already existed and worked for me. And over time, it has become the best part of my day that really sets me up for success and keeps me regulated. I definitely feel off on those rare days that I miss it. Add the thing that you want to do on to something that you already do every day. This has been by far and away the easiest way for me to incorporate reading into my life. The next tip is something I started doing more recently, but have really been enjoying, and it's listening to audiobooks during my commute. I recently moved and I have a longer drive to work now, so I figured I would try to optimize that time and make the most of it since I'm typically listening to something anyway, usually music or a podcast. So I just primarily replace that with audiobooks. Not always. I still allow myself music or a podcast when that's, what I'm in the mood for. I commute for about an hour to an hour 15 in total during the day, and that is a lot of time that I can reallocate to reading. But, and I cannot stress this enough, I am terrible at auditory learning. I have horrible short-term memory. It is very easy for me to zone out and suddenly I have no clue what's going on. So I have learned to pick audiobooks that are not too dense and also not super precious to me, meaning not something I'm dying to annotate or read a physical copy of. So things like contemporary romance, more general fiction, memoirs, those type of books tend to work best for me. I think of audiobooks as my very casual read. They're still valuable, but I don't put pressure on myself to absorb every detail. And bonus tip for the ADDers is to listen at 1.5 or 1.8 times speed, because not only does it help keep your attention, but it also helps you read faster. Speaking of my horrible short-term memory, let's talk about how I actually remember what I read. I started annotating books as a way to stay engaged and also to retain more information. And it totally works for me. Highlighting, tabbing, adding sticky notes, writing in my books, it turns reading into an interactive experience for me, and it really gives my brain that dopamine kick to keep me invested. It becomes like an activity. It's not just reading a book, but it's highlighting and writing and tabbing and matching the color of my tabs to the book cover and refreshing my attention span when I go to pick up my pen or put a tab down. Like all of these little things that build up into multiple hits of dopamine for my brain that keep me engaged in the process. I definitely do not annotate every book that I read. It's typically reserved for like literary fiction, sometimes fantasy, or just books that I think I'll really like or might want to come back to in the future. Plus, it helps me read more critically, which is very important, especially in this day and age. Doing this not only helps me to retain more information about a book, which is really helpful for someone like me who has terrible memory, but it also allows the experience to become like a conversation with myself and with the author, especially if I'm time rereading it. And the video that actually introduced me to annotating and helped me get started in that area was by Elizabeth from Plant-Based Bride. She is my like holy grail booktuber, and she does such a great job of explaining the concept in her video and also detailing the different levels of involvement you can have with it. So definitely go check out that video if you're even remotely interested in it, or even if you're not, it's just great content. Everything that she does, I'm obsessed with. So I'll have that linked for you guys to check out. Okay, let's talk about decision paralysis, because wow, it can ruin my momentum so fast. I'd finish a book and then I would spiral over what to read next, being terrified of making the wrong decision. So I have learned to sometimes start outsourcing that decision. I had my boyfriend Jesse pick the books I read for a week, and I genuinely loved almost everything that he chose for me. I also made a TBR jar where I draw prompts to help me pick my books instead of just picking them directly. And both of those have taken so much pressure off of the process and honestly make it way more fun. It also, I feel like, allows me to be more present in the reading process. Like, it kind of takes the pressure off if a book ends up not really working out for me and helps me be able to move on to the next easily. Also, if you haven't seen either of those videos yet, I will link them down below. Speaking of books that don't always work out, here's something else I had to learn as an adult reader, especially one with ADD, is that it's okay not to finish a book. If I'm about 50 to 100 pages in and I'm not enjoying it like at all, or like garnering anything from it, I allow myself to just stop and move on. Like, no guilt. Sometimes I can't get into the writing style or like the pacing, and if that's the case, I'll typically come back to it at a later point. But sometimes I really don't like the content, it's just not for me, and in those cases, I donate it to someone else who can enjoy it more than I did. Either way, I stop and move on, and that mindset shift has definitely helped keep me from burnout. All right, these next two tips are more just like bonus tips that have aided in my own personal enjoyment of reading, again, as someone with ADD, but are by no means necessary for you personally to get back into reading. And the first one is my Kobo. I recently bought a Kobo Libra color, and it is truly one of my favorite purchases I've made like in a really long time. I wanted something I could easily carry around and read in public without always having a physical book on me. And I picked the Libra color specifically because you can annotate and write in it, much like a physical book, which helps with sort of keeping me engaged with my ebooks as well. I was not an ebook reader for a long time because it was just harder for me to connect to it in that aspect. And especially since I started annotating my books, I loved the idea of being able to do that with my ebooks too. The best part is you can connect it to Libby, which means you can borrow ebooks from your library and read them on your Kobo, but you can also annotate them. I didn't even know it was possible to annotate the borrowed Libby books, but you can. And while it was definitely a large and like expensive purchase, I'm trying to be more mindful about my consumption of books overall. So I love that I can borrow digital library books or just buy ebooks instead of buying physical copies, and I'm trying to do that for the most part to also sort of offset the cost of the Kobo because it's not cheap. I also recently subscribed to Book of the Month, which I know is not for everyone. Again, just talking about being mindful of consumption. But I personally enjoyed the dopamine of like selecting and, you know, getting sent a new book every month. And I do personally feel like the value is solid for what I pay. I also freely skip months if it's not in my budget for that month, or I'm not like immediately drawn to one of the options, so that I'm not forcing myself to buy a book that like I don't even know that I'll like that much. And again, since I mostly buy my books secondhand or buy ebooks or rent books through Libby, this is like my one monthly splurge, and it makes me excited to pick up a new read and again like already have it sort of pre-chosen for me. So those were the 7 tips that have genuinely changed the reading game for me and made it much more enjoyable and just more a part of my daily routine. It's not perfect and I still have reading slumps just like everyone else, but having these tools in place has genuinely made reading one of the best parts of my life again. I look forward to it every single day. And if you have ADD, ADHD, or even just like a chaotic schedule and want to build your own reading routine, I hope these tips were helpful and I hope that this gave you some ideas. Let me know in the comments what tips you guys have, what has helped you get back into or stay consistent with reading, or even what's like still been hard for you. I'd love to learn even more tips and tricks from you guys. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out my TBR jar or Boyfriend Picks My Book videos. If you haven't already, I will link those down below. And yeah, that's it. See you later. Bye.